Okay, hello and welcome everybody to this event about using all the amazing skills that you've acquired so far in your career, maybe to start a new project, do something different, or even move on completely and start a new business. We've got a great panel lined up for you who've all been there and done that very successfully. We have got some changes tonight. Various people haven't been able to come, unfortunately. But rest assured, you're going to get absolutely brilliant advice from people who know what they're talking about. I'm super grateful to Alexandra Campbell, who has stepped in as chair, and she'll also be contributing to the discussion. Alexandra, in a former incarnation, was a very successful editor and writer about lifestyle and beauty on top women's monthly magazines, and she's now completely transformed herself into an influencer and vlogger and blogger and Instagrammer about her passion, gardening, and actually is making quite a reasonable living out of it as well, as far as I understand. So I'm going to hand over now to Alison, and she's going to introduce the panel. Please do put questions in the chat. You're very welcome. Anything that you want to ask, now's your chance to get some really great advice. And we'll leave some time at the end to go over the questions so that you can interact with the panelists. Okay, thanks very much everyone for coming, and I'll see you in a bit.
Oh, Alison, are you going to say a few words? And you're muted.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to... Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, just for those of you who haven't met before, I'm Alison Phillips. I'm the current chair of Women in Journalism. So I think this was an event that we put on because so many members had said that that sometimes they're thinking about whether they want to continue in journalism forever, or about what could they do with all those skills they've gained all over those years in journalism, and put them into setting up their own business or doing their own thing, which is a real passion. So thank you very much for taking part. And Alexandra, thank you very much for chairing it for us. And I think we'll all kind of learn quite a lot from it this evening. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, I think I'm just going to ask the panel to introduce themselves and to say where they started in journalism and where they are now and how they thought that linked up. And then we'll go around and ask for some top tips from each person as to how what they think really helps and what you should be thinking about if you are thinking about changing career. And so let's kick off. I can kick off if you like, just to say I started in the trade press. I think it's called Business to Business now. And then I went to be assistant editor and beauty editor on She, beauty and associate editor on Harper's and Queen, and managing editor on Good Housekeeping. And then when my children were small, I went freelance. And I wrote for a lot of magazines and newspapers, but I also became a novelist and had 9 novels published by Penguin and Little Brown. But by 2008, freelance fees were really dropping. The rates were dropping a lot, and so were novel advances, particularly as the internet sort of took a great deal of really that time and that money and those eyeballs. And my publishers suggested that I blog because they thought novelists should be blogging in order to publicize their books, which actually it's one of the things blogging really doesn't do, is publicize your book. But anyway, I started to blog and I realized I didn't know anything about it. So I researched it and found a blogging online course from someone called John Morrow, who has a huge empire of teaching people about blogging. And he's actually quadriplegic. He can speak and he can move his head, but he can't move anything else. And he's done all that with blogging, which I think is amazing. And then at about 2017, and then people started to talk to me and say, oh, you know, could I teach them blogging? And I started to teach blogging. But the problem with teaching, and I think this is something that's relevant when you're thinking of moving on in your career, is that it's not scalable. You know, you put all your work into a particular workshop or a session, and then when it's over, you've got to find another one. And I started 2 blogs while I was teaching, really to check I was teaching it properly. And one was on writing and one was on gardening, a middle-sized garden. And the middle-sized garden took off quite quickly. And the writing one I never felt enthusiastic about, which I think is another thing. You really have to love what you do when you're working for yourself. And then, of course, everyone said, you've got to be on video. And I hate being in front of the camera and I'm hopeless with tech. So really, the idea of starting a YouTube channel seemed madness, but because they said, well, you've got to be on video, I thought, well, I've got to be on video, you know. So I started a YouTube channel, and it's now got 104,000 subscribers, and it's just past 10 million views of all my videos since 2017. And the blog now gets about 4.5 million page views a year. And it sort of brings me in what I would call a sort of professional salary, but not a particularly high one. But nevertheless, that's a huge change from looking at freelance fees and novel advances dwindling to nothing. So that's you know, where I came from and went to. Joy, what about you?
Is Joy Roxburgh? Is that me?
No, Joy Francis.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I was on mute. Hi, hello, fellow Joy.
Hi.
Hiya. I started out on track to be a lawyer because I was passionate about social justice from when I was a kid. So when milk was withdrawn from my junior school, I went on strike about 9 years old. And that continued over into me being a very political and an activist, volunteering in the community and so on. So I think that influenced the type of journalist that I wanted to be. I always wanted to be a journalist, but I thought I'd want to be a foreign correspondent. I didn't see any people of color, any Black women doing that when I was growing up, because I'm in my mid-50s. And so I always had a sense that I'd have to do something with words. So I ended up, much like Alexandra, I started off in the trade press on Community Care magazine, because I wanted to focus on social issues, which when it was around, it's now digital, like most magazines, gone online. And so I did campaigning journalism for 4.5 years, everything around elder abuse in residential care, right through to children in care, NIMBYism, care in the community. And it was a very dynamic team, many PPA awards. I was the first Black journalist on the publication. And I got to be acting deputy features editor. And I always knew I wouldn't stay, because what struck me was that it felt confining. The stories that I wanted to tell, I always felt it was a privilege to interview people, for them to share their stories with me. But I felt, you know, those are the days when you used to write 1,000 plus words per feature, and I still felt that wasn't enough. And they, to their credit, they tried to sort of give me roles that I wanted, but I wanted to leave. I didn't have anything to leave to go to. I just knew I wanted to say yes to whatever came my way. Word came out that I'd left, so I got approached by BBC 5 Live, who'd been following the reporting that I was doing, and I said I don't want to come back full time, so to the media. So I ended up being a senior researcher. So there's so many legislative changes that were happening, so I disseminate everything and feed the programs, especially around current affairs. I became a contracted freelancer for The Guardian, and wrote cross media, money, and so on, which I enjoyed. And I ended up doing a lot of stuff around digital. So I worked for Channel 4 Online when it first came online. So it was really mixed. I was involved with New Nation when it's set up as a rival to The Voice. So that is a story of my life where I always got approached to do things. I just said, all right. I was approached to lecture at my old journalism college, which was London College of Printing, because I studied politics first and then did journalism. I said, all right, and enjoyed that. And I think that's largely been my journalistic track. Freelance broadly, British Journalism Review and so on. I edited Pride magazine. Again, I got approached, so I said yes. I set up public sector from scratch for Ethnic Media Group, which again was the first publication that looked at the experience of Black people and people of colour in the public sector, which I'm very proud of and did very, very well. And I left it and handed it over to another generation. And it was an opportunity to train or provided a lot of Black journalists with their first opportunity to get a foot in the door of journalism. And so all of those sort of different experiences led me, particularly in the wake of Stephen Lawrence's murder, because I interviewed many politicians through my career, Jack Straw being one, and myself and 4 other journalists, Henry Bonsu, Paul Macy, Vina Josh, and David Jimmer, we set up the Creative Collective in response to the lack of diversity within the industry, particularly the print media. You know, I've never set up a business in my life, but I'm very organized, very structured. So we set it up properly as a limited company. Within months, we were offered a space at the Freedom Forum in London. Then we got money from America. I went on a field trip, got money from Freedom Forum in America saying, we have an internship program. We think you can set it up equivalent in the UK, but you have to get newspapers to cough up money. If you do that, that's an achievement. Came back, told my colleagues, they said, what on earth are you doing? I said, yes. So ran the Creative Collective we had run that for about 15 years. I used it as an opportunity to leave journalism full time to run that. And we did media training all over the world, particularly in relation to refugees and countries that were coming out of communism and becoming democratized. And then midpoint, I set up with Words of Colour Productions, co-founded that with Nicole Moore as a community initiative, but refounded it as a social enterprise with a particular focus on writers of colour of all genres, because very aware that our narratives weren't being fully represented. And also the fact that I wasn't seeing enough journalists and writers like myself in the industry. Also, what I was aware of is the fact that a lot of writing organizations specialize. So you have script writing, journalism, literature, they're all separate. And so I thought, well, no, we need to represent all the writing genres in one space, and which we did and we do. And so I would say the last 4 years, I've publicly come out as a creative entrepreneur, because I have seemed to be drawn to collaborations. I'm very solution focused. If we say we're going to do something, I look at the practicalities. How can we do it? I work with different creative industries, but I accept the fact that what they call change is too slow. So what I do is work with other like-minded people to get things done very quickly, using a range of resources, because I'm into sustainability. And a lot of the time they have to come to us to work with us, because we're doing what they said was impossible or would take another 10 years. I'm sure I will we'll talk a bit more because it's very nuanced. But yeah, I think a big driver for me has always been creating platforms to enable other communities, racialized communities, and others to have the opportunity to create their own media and make their stories accessible. Skilling up, but also enabling people to understand that if the industry, be it advertising or media or publishing, does not serve you, doesn't keep you well and respect you and your ideas, then leave and set up your own thing. And I think that's a driver for how I operate.
Thank you, that's great. Rachel, would you like to tell us now how you got to where you were?
Yeah, thank you. So my name's Rachel Schofield. I'm one of those people, if you kind of cut me in half, I have the words BBC written in my core and have had for about 20 years. So I had a typical route into the BBC. I see my lovely former colleague Alex Sinker there. So came up through postgrad diploma in broadcast journalism, went through the normal route of local radio, local TV news in the BBC, came via things like Woman's Hour as a reporter and You and Yours on Radio 4, and ended up for the last probably 15 years or more at the BBC News Channel as a presenter. Through all that, I did what a lot of women do who become mums. So I went from full-time to part-time, then I went freelance. And then what happened in my case was about 3 years ago, I think I just realized I wasn't loving it. And it wasn't even a kind of, I don't like it here. It wasn't like a really powerful realization. It was just a sense of, I think there might be something different out there. I have a feeling it was probably Brexit that did it for me. So it's probably going back a bit further than that. Realizing that a lot of the skills I was using, I still really enjoyed. So I liked, I suppose, if I'm honest, the performance element of TV journalism, particularly if you're on the presenting side. I liked the analysis and the prep work. I liked the idea that at the BBC, we were kind of taking an educating role. I liked questions, I liked listening. So all of those skills I enjoy, but I think what I noticed was I was fed up with the outcome of what I was doing, particularly through things like Brexit, where interviews and talking to people seemed very combative rather than collaborative. I was interviewing people who were going to always give me BS kind of answers because there was a lot of politicians around. And I thought, if I have to ask these same questions over and over again to still have no actual result, it's going to push me over the edge. So I think it was at that point that I decided, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, but I thought I want to do something. I thought about media training. I thought about what can I do. And in the end, long story short, decided without knowing exactly what I would do with it, to train alongside my BBC work as a coach. So as a personal development coach, what you might call a life coach, although I always steer away from that because people, it comes with so many connotations. So I did that training about 2.5 years ago and qualified and realized that I was really enjoying that. There was a lot of overlap with the skills that I had, but where did I want to take that? And what I've been exploring over the last year or so is, you know, where do I take those skills? I still toy with the idea of working as a trainer for media people and using some of the coaching alongside that. But actually at the moment, the space I predominantly work in is with women, probably who've experienced a bit like I had as a mum in my kind of 40s, that sense of, okay, I've kind of given a lot of time to my kids. A lot of the women I work with as a career coach have stepped out of formal work for some time and have kind of come up for air as their kids get a bit bigger and think, okay, my turn now, but do I want to still be a lawyer? Do I want to go back to being an accountant? Do I want to do something different? You know, they're often driven to think maybe now's the new chapter. So that's the space that I work in, having added to my personal development coaching an additional qualification in specific career change coaching. So what's interesting for me tonight is obviously I bring my own experience as a career changer, but also I bring with me the kind of framework that I use with clients who are looking at this idea of what next? What do I really want? What does that look like? And how do I make it happen? So that's me. And I'm now fully doing that. I'm not at the Beeb anymore. And yeah, I think from a point of view of authenticity, I'm not making a massive living from that. I'm fortunate the position I'm in is that I'm not the main breadwinner in our family, so I've got the option to let that business grow. But as Alexandra was saying, the scalability, you and I should talk about scalability, Alexandra. I'm sure you've got lots to tell me about that.
Really important.
Yeah, one-to-one work is you know, it is tough because you constantly need a stream of new clients. So that's a whole other topic. But just I would think it's important to let people know where you're kind of at. So I'm in the early stages perhaps of my personal rebrand journey, but it's going well and definitely growing.
Thank you. And Jem.
Awesome. Hi. Hello, everyone. Yeah, my name's Jem. I run a social enterprise called Journey Resources that helps people both get into journalism and progress when they get there. My background is that I always knew I wanted to do something with words. I kind of landed on journalism because I don't think I have the dedication to write a novel. I was like, there are a lot of words there. I think I need shorter pieces. So I did a journalism degree at the University of Kent. I finished that in 2014. And after that, kind of went straight into your typical journalism job. I worked at a local TV station for a year, got very bored of being rained on the side of the road, decided I didn't want to do that anymore. And my second job was moving to London to kind of do some politics video. And that was the job where I think it was only about 6 months in, I remember very vividly being taken into the office and being told that we haven't got any money to keep you. And I'm sure this is an experience that a lot of people in the journalism industry had had. And I very much remember being like, oh my God, I've got rent to pay. What am I going to do? I don't know how to kind of, you know, this is my second job out of university. I don't know what I'm doing. Ringing up my friend being like, you just need to come around tonight with a crate of wine and we're going to sort this out. And I think that was probably the turning point for me. So it was around that time that I set up Journal Resources, mainly kind of out of it was never really a business plan. It was I don't know what I'm doing and I can't find the answers anywhere else. I was kind of thrust into freelancing. I didn't really know what I was doing, and I couldn't find the answers I wanted. And equally, I was applying for jobs and couldn't find the answers there. So decided to set up this newsletter, a very simple website, which looking back now at that old design, genuinely looks terrible. And kind of just kept going with that as a little bit of a side project. It's been 5 years now. When I first started it, it very much was just me kind of doing a newsletter, I think every month to start off with, and then it became every 2 weeks and every week. And it was just me doing that alongside freelancing, alongside some jobs, alongside part-time stuff. But I just kept going at it because it was something that I really enjoyed. And as I kept doing it, I realized more and more people were using it. And I was like, oh, maybe there might be something here. So I kept plugging away at it, and it's been 5.5 years now. And finally, last August, I made the switch to this being my full-time job. So I would still view myself as a journalist, I guess, first and foremost. Haven't quite let go of that yet. But I am, the person running the business. So I'm the person doing the selling, kind of running the website, anything you can think of, running payroll. I never knew there was so much involved in running payroll. But so that's kind of a very whistle-stop tour, is that this has been something I've been plugging away as a part-time project that I've slowly kind of built up gradually. I've never put any money into it. It's always been, until last August, around paying jobs and kind of in the evenings, in the weekends, that kind of thing. And yeah, it was only that, that recently that it's finally become the full-time job. So I'm excited to kind of share a little bit this evening, hopefully, around how you can kind of potentially do that in a more gradual way and kind of really build up. Yeah, I think that's it in a whistle stop. So I'll pass back and then we could probably talk tips.
Lovely. I think one thing that's sort of emerging quite strongly is something that I very much believe in, is that we're very much in the sort of side hustle age, and that it's much, much easier than it was, I think, to actually do your main job and to learn something else and to do something else. And obviously there's time and work-life balance issues over that. But it's certainly, blogging and video was a small part of my life, and then it became a bigger one. And in the YouTube world, practically everybody does it as a side hustle, and then they suddenly just get to earning just enough money to be able to pay the rent and everything, and then they take a deep breath, and then they can put all the time and effort into it that really makes it sing. So I think that's a really encouraging thing. If we start with Joy, what would you say is your sort of number one tip if someone's sitting there thinking, I'm really, I've really fed up with this job. My boss is horrible to me, or, I just don't, I've lost the love for it, as Rachel was saying. What would your advice be to them?
Oh my goodness. I think you have to sit with yourself. I think a lot of the time you externalize everything. Sometimes when you want to leave, there's a sort of panic, and you externalize, so you look outside of yourself for the answers. I think that you really do need to sit with yourself first. And people talk about vision boards. I think, you need to, in a way, map out in whatever way works for you. It could be audio, it could be just drawing, but I think you need to look at what is driving you to want something new. Because a lot of the time, if you don't ask yourself the right questions, journalistically, we're great at asking questions of other people, but not of ourselves. So I think the first thing you have to do is ask yourself, be honest. Are you fleeing, escaping, because normally you will land somewhere that's going to be worse? Or do you want to leave on your terms to do something that fulfills you? So you have to identify what fulfills you, why, have some idea of how much you want to earn, and be honest about the skills that you have and don't have. Because I think a lot of the time you may think that, I don't have these skills, therefore I can't venture, be a digital entrepreneur, for example. No, if there's things that you do not have time for and don't enjoy doing, just put that aside and say, well, let me find who could facilitate me with this. Because a lot of the time you'll find, whether you call yourself a business person or entrepreneur, you need people. You cannot operate in these spaces on your own. So I think it's the skills audit for yourself, almost like a well-being audit. So what will keep you in the next space, how much you want to earn and why. because a lot of the time in traditional jobs or careers, you earn about 100,000, you don't see your family and friends. So you need to map out, okay, I want to earn this amount, but this is a lifestyle that I want. And think about how it feels. What will it feel like to be in that position? So in a way, it's almost like you're getting yourself ready for it before whatever the it emerges. So I think, and that does not cost you any money. And also identify people who you really admire. You'd be really surprised when you say, look, I would take you out for coffee and muffin. I did that so many times, and that worked. And I got some amazing advice. And I think if journalistically, use the skills that you have, because, you know, part of our job is about persuading people. But I think if you're clear about your vision, other people buy into it.
Yeah. I quite agree. I also think one thing we're really good at as journalists is researching. You know, if we don't know something and we're given a story, we have to find someone who does know something, which is just what you've been saying. And then you have to ask them how to do it or what to do it. And then you have to turn that into something that's coherent for the way you live your life or how you want to live your life. And actually, I think all of those skills are fantastically journalistic skills. So Rachel, what would you say is your, you know, the starting point for someone who's ready to just say, I want to move on, or even I want to start thinking about moving on, you know, not to go full time away, but, you know.
Yeah, I think to echo what Joy was saying, I think the first thing you have to do is work out where you are on the career change journey, because people come in at different points. And some people are very early on there. They're thinking about it, but it's very vague and unknown. And the danger in that space, like as Joy was giving a brilliant example of, is you don't really know who you are and what you want. And if you jump too soon at that point, you don't really know where you're jumping. So you start firing off other job applications, or you start sort of going full pelt at some crazy idea that's just struck you, but you've not taken the time. So where are you on the journey? Or are you at the point where you think, no, I've got a really good idea and I'm pretty much ready to go all in? So being honest, first of all, and knowing what needs to happen next. So the journey I take people on is exactly what Joy was saying. You start with that identity piece of like, who am I now? Because how often do we get the chance to actually reflect on that? So a career coach will tend to cover things like, yeah, what interests me? What do I enjoy doing? What motivates me? What's my definition of success? All of those, you know, they sound like big questions, but you can break them down so that you get really clear on what it is that you're heading towards, what you'd like your ideal job to look like. So it's important to do that thinking, but then it's important not to get stuck there, because you can't think your way into a career change. And what tends to happen is people have maybe 2 or 3 versions of themselves that float around. So one day you think, I'm ready to go be a solopreneur. Another day you think, well, I'm ready to take my journalism skills and maybe go and freelance somewhere totally different. Maybe I want to go, shall I go and work and do PR? You know, so you've often got several ideas. And again, that can be where people procrastinate and get stuck, because they think, if I just think about this for a bit longer, it'll come to me. Well, the bad news is it won't. And that's at the point where you need to almost set out and road test those ideas. So what are the lowest risk ways that you can find to start trying out those ideas? Whether that is exactly what you guys were saying, going and having those curious conversations with other people, thinking, who's doing what I fancy doing? What can they tell me? Going and thinking, yeah, I think I'd like to be a garden designer. And I'm sure you'd echo this, Alexandra. You don't then go and sort of sign up straight away to a $2,000 course that's going to take you 6 months. You go and think, okay, I'll go and do a taster day. I'll go and volunteer at my local garden centre. You know, I'll road test this idea before I dive in and then decide 6 weeks in, oh my God, I hate this. It wasn't what I thought at all. So I think finding ways and finding people to help that passive research, because a lot of us get stuck Googling. You've probably got 10 websites that you visit regularly, imagining if you visit them one more time, it's going to come to you that you should definitely do this. No, your research needs to move from the passive to the active, and finding the kind of low risk, low time investment ways to start trialing your ideas, be that volunteering, shadowing, going and doing something, a short course before you go for the big one, you know, talking to people. So that would be my advice in terms of some of the process initially.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And also what I found hugely helpful when I was trying to, you know, learn film editing and videoing, which I had zero experience in, is that there's a huge amount of free educational information out there, and also a great amount of freemium, which is where you might do a sort of 5-day online course with someone, and then they've got their 6-week, much more in-depth course with a bit of one-to-one coaching, and that costs. But by the time you've done a few 5-day online courses, actually it's you know, you've got a good idea. I want to go with that person, and actually no, that one's not really where I want to go. And almost any skills have got that now. I mean, you know, photography, garden design, I mean, you know, interior design, counselling, I mean, really wherever you want to go. And so I think that's a great sort of, a great deal of freedom that we have now that perhaps we didn't have 20 years ago. Jem, what are your advice?
I think moving on from, I think a thing that we all kind of, a couple of things we've all touched on is, I think it's really important not to have something, whatever it is that you're thinking of doing, I think you don't want it to be just something that you enjoy. I think it has to also be something that you actually really believe in and really, really passionate about. And I think that's really important. I think especially for the, you know, the long time that I've been doing this, there are going to be days when you're like, I hate this, or, you know, I don't like this particular part of the business. I ran the numbers once, and I think, you know, the amount of words I write in my weekly newsletter across the year is like 87,000 words. Like, that's a lot of words. And if that's something that you don't actually believe in, you're going to get sick of it. So I think actually, first of all, really thinking, do I not just enjoy this, but do I believe in this? Do I think I want to do this enough that I can get through the days where I'm like, oh God, you know, I hate this. I don't want to do it anymore. Do you have that kind of passion for the idea that you think you can get through that? Because there will always be those days. And I think also just appreciating, I think from the outset, that things will take time. I see a lot of, you know, really passionate young people, or any stage of career really, who kind of, you know, go, right, I'm going to do this, I'm going to start it, and then kind of, you know, get really disheartened after 3-6 months because it hasn't picked up yet. And actually, you know, it's taken me 5.5 years to get here, and I really don't think it started picking up until about year 3 or 4, and that's a long time. And I think it's really easy to go, oh, you know, I've set up that Instagram account and it just hasn't really picked up, like, I'm going to put that away. Whereas I think there's a lot to be said for longevity and actually just keeping going with it because you believe in it, and then that work will pay off. But you know, I think there's a stat knocking around businesses don't become profitable generally for about 3 years. And I think that, in my experience, does hold true, in that, you know, you might get lucky, you might have some overnight success, something might kind of click out of chance with the zeitgeist and what's happening. But actually, I think that longevity kind of really is the driving factor. And the final thing that I kind of written down that I wanted to say here is tied in with that is just, I think it's really important to also start small in a sense as well. Like, my website now has a million different things on it. It's got a jobs board, it's got, you know, actual investigative bits of journalism, it's got all sorts of stuff. It didn't start like that. What I started off with was a newsletter that went out once a month because that's the time I had to commit to it. And it's actually much better to go, I'm going to identify the small bit of the gap in the market that I want to go for, and I'm going to do that one bit really well and really kind of hone that and then expand outwards. Whereas I think if you try and go, I've got this grand vision of where I want to be in 5 years' time, and I'm going to try and do all of these bits, you become overwhelmed, you don't do any of them particularly well, and then you kind of also burn out really quickly. So I think, yeah, pick something you believe in, really give it some time, really develop it, and really kind of pick what that one thing is you want to do really well to start off with that you'll get known for, and really hone that before you kind of think about spreading out.
Yes, I think that's very good. And I also think that we are living in what I have heard described as the post-permissions age, which means that in, 20 years ago, if you wanted to write a book or a feature or start a shop or teach someone, you had to find an editor to commission you, you had to find, a bank manager to give you a loan, you had to find a university or school to employ you. But of course, now there is actually so much that you can do yourself sort of part-time, really. I mean, if you want to teach meditation, you could put it on a platform like Teachable or Udemy. So you're not even starting your own thing. You're not putting a lot of money into it. But I totally think that this thing about showing up and keeping going is so important, because certainly if I look at all the people who've sort of started YouTube with me, the ones who showed up and keep going have got really good results, and the ones who expected to be an overnight success didn't. And also looking back in a much bigger way, every single person I know who has said that they wanted to have a novel published, every single one of them has had a novel published if they kept going. So it's almost like, because, you know, there are hundreds of thousands of people trying to write novels every year, and there are thousands and thousands pouring into every agent and the slush pile is enormous. But actually so many of those people just drop out, and you can just stay in the race simply by staying in the race. You know, that pushes you automatically to the top of the slush pile. And it's extraordinary. I just couldn't, you know, I just look back and there's nobody who really wanted to have a novel published who hasn't, that, you know, and that's over 40 years, obviously. I
just wanted to add
sorry,
just wanted to really just quickly add a couple of things, because especially Jem, because I've been doing this since 2000, you know, and I think that you need to have a relation. It depends, because obviously if you want a different career, that's one thing. If you want to set up your own business, you know, there's specific things around just making sure you understand cash flow and understand what structure, because I know how many women who set up structures that hampered them, and they were paying VAT and everything else. It did not serve the purpose of the vision. And some of them had to just, you know, start again. That's another thing. And finding your tribe. And I think that that's so important, because I think that a lot of the time you're sort of led to believe you need to keep your plans secret. You need to talk to people. Don't talk to them without intent. It's intentional conversations. You need to talk to people, because synchronicity is also a significant part of this. Because where I keep landing, I didn't wake up like that. I'm like, look where I am. How did that happen? And it's the conversations that you have with people that spark, and also invest in others, because a lot of the time, people that I gave a half an hour to or gave time to are in particular positions that's very beneficial to me now. Yeah, and diversify. So even though, yes, it's important to start off, and I totally agree with you, Jem, because I was very niche at the beginning, and then like you, so many different directions, because it's all grow. You're a farmer essentially, and I think the diversification is really important, because my first business, we got hit by the credit crunch, and we lost 60% of our work overnight, but we kept going. Managed to our smaller clients helped us to keep going, and as a result of that, I set up another company, co-founded something else. And I just took that diversification model. So if something falls flat, because failure is part of it. If something falls flat, there's something else that's, you know, sustainable.
Absolutely. No, that's very, very important. I wonder if, Hilly, have we got questions coming in now? I'm just very aware that we've, have we got questions, Hilly? Hilly? No.
There is one in the chat if you would like me to read it out.
Yes, perhaps if I, sorry, this is where my tech thing, I start to get very wobbly, is actually having to find the chat myself.
So there's one that
right.
There's been asked around what skills, whether we can suggest any other careers that utilize our unique skills other than PR. The question is, I've been doing it, you know, the commenter has been doing it for 6 months after being in journalism for 20 years, but it's making them miserable. Do any of us have any suggestions for any other kind of unique skills?
Well, I personally think that almost any career can uses a lot of the skills that journalism has, because, as I say, researching, finding out who knows what, putting together a cohesive story. I think teaching, for instance, is a big one. And with teaching, I would definitely say that you either go, you know, to a college or university, but then you have to do a whole course and give up your life, and, you know, it's a whole year and so on and so forth, or else you can do this kind of, you know, teaching online and slowly building up and doing it in the side effect. I'm sure Rachel has got many suggestions. So what do you think?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Apple. I would say, funnily enough, as a coach, I don't make a lot of suggestions. I just ask a lot of questions. So what I would encourage people to do is kind of look for the clues. So when you say it's making me miserable in PR, get really curious about what's making you miserable. You know, think about your week and think, what is it I really don't want to do? What is it I want to absolutely do less of? You know, is the problem what I'm doing? Is the problem where I'm doing it? So is it PR itself is just not for you? Is it the place you're doing it means nothing to you? You're not invested. Is it the people that you're doing it with? You know, are there bits of it you like? And if so, it's sort of trying to really mine the information. People think that they can put information, there's a kind of magic database that will say the job for you is this. I would suggest that the only person who could answer this, and this isn't a cop-out, but it genuinely is to say, the person who has that answer is you. And I don't mean that in a wishy-washy way. I mean, drill down into, you know, if you had to do that job tomorrow, your PR job, if you could kind of get rid of 5 of the tasks and just do 2 of them, what would they be? Because you might go, actually, I do like this bit. I do like the writing, or I do like the bit where I get to talk to clients, or I do. And so start to kind of really home in on the bits that you like, and then think, where do they show up? Or what organization, you know, think of it in a different way. Think, if I could work in any organization, what would it be? And see what themes come up for you. Because we tend to think about our professional life, but actually we need to think quite holistically as well, and think, you know, what am I enjoying doing in my spare time? And it's not all about going, well, I like drawing, so therefore I should be an art teacher. It's not necessarily as sort of binary as that. It's not like, here's my passion, I should go do it professionally. But it's almost thinking, yeah, I love going to restaurants. Does that mean you should be a restaurant critic? Does that mean you should be a chef? Not necessarily, but what is it about that you love? Is it food? Is it people? Is it bustling environments? Is it running your own business? So try and like find the threads that you keep seeing come up that interest you, and then think, who do I know who does that kind of thing, or who's doing that in some way? Let me go and have some curious conversations. Let me go to some places where those kind of people hang out. I hope that doesn't feel vague, but I'm not a great one for going, you could do X, Y, Z, because you can probably Google that, but it still might not be right for you. Sorry, Joy.
No, I'm going to build, because a lot of what I'm ticking, because I put some, I'm like, yep, I was going to say that. Yep. I also think a lot of your skills are transferable, but you have to be honest about your personality type, and what makes you comfortable and uncomfortable, and what environments make you shine, and what brings your energy up and down. And also, going back to what Alexandra said earlier on about research, what are the trends? We are coming out of a recession. We are coming out of a pandemic. Institutions are under greater scrutiny and criticism, because they are not seen as fueling people's well-being. A lot of people, this is a time a lot of people are thinking about changing careers, but also a lot of corporations, 70% of their budget goes externally for expertise outside of the organization. So a big growth area is facilitation, because a lot of institutions, whether it's creative institutions or otherwise, are realizing they've got a significant number of blind spots. And I think once you have skills around communication, then you can reposition yourself in terms of facilitation and consultation, because now that's a real thing. It's not just consultancy. People need facilitation to rethink how they operate and how they connect. And so it would be good for you to sort of do your research to see what opportunities are coming up that complements the skills that you have. But definitely check on trends. And a lot of the time you can find that just on social media, in terms of some of the discussions that are going on. And you know what it's like, a lot of the time, the best stories as a journalist comes up with a gap, where you have a question, why is it I always hear this, or why are we in this situation time and again, which is obviously, Rachel, you faced often, and then see what your answer is, because normally that is something that you can create something to fill that gap.
I think there's actually quite a lot to be said also, is if you're looking for your way in life, I'm quite a believer in making sure that you go to at least one social media platform and really get to understand it and really make it work for you. Partly because if you do start something on your own, you need that platform, you need that way of getting to people. But also you do hear things. And I think people think about social media, oh, it's there to promote me. And it's not, it's about conversations. And, what you're saying is completely correct. And you see a lot of negativity about social media, which is all true, but the positive side is that there are huge opportunities there. And I saw on Instagram the other day somebody called Not Another Jungle, and he said he was announcing that he'd been asked to be a keynote speaker for a lecture on plants, at a Cambridge college. And he said, I came from a very poor council estate in Newcastle. We didn't have opportunities, certainly not to go to university and certainly not Cambridge. And I've always loved plants, but 2 years ago, I started an Instagram account and I've got 75,000 followers. And I'm now started my plant shop online, and I've been asked to be a keynote speaker at Cambridge College. I couldn't have imagined it. And I just think those opportunities are there, and they are there for us all to take. There aren't gatekeepers trying to stop us or saying, you know, you've got to get A levels, you've got to be something, you've got to be this sort of person or that sort of person. He just did it. And I really think it's, you know, whatever the limitations of social media, I think it's really worth getting to know at least one platform well. Jem, what do you think about sort of other areas that people could work in?
I think you've all broadly said everything I wanted to say, but I think the only thing I would really stress is I think Rachel, you mentioned this a little bit earlier, just around having that separation between really nailing down between, is it the job or is it kind of where I'm at, and kind of really splitting out those two things. I've left my fair share of jobs in my time without a real plan of where I'm going because I didn't enjoy it. And I think it's been different each time. For sometimes it's been because I didn't want to be a broadcast journalist. I didn't want to stand on the side of the road. I loved the people, but that's why I wasn't happy there. So I knew that's why I was moving on. Other times I've left jobs, it's just because actually I've realized, you know, that kind of environment wasn't right for me. So I think actually that's one of the most important things I would say to try and differentiate, is to really kind of drill down whether it's the company or whether it's the work or whether it's something else. Because having done it about 3 times, I think I'm just not very good at being employed by other people. But that's a separate conversation. I much prefer doing my own thing. But I think having had that experience of leaving, I'm very aware that each time it's been for a different reason.
I think it's been very difficult for people over the pandemic as well, because, I mean, certainly I know with my daughter is that she absolutely hates working from home. And she suddenly started to think, I need to do something different in my life. But actually, now she's back in the office, she realizes that was what she hated, was the working from home, not the job. So I think all that thing you've all been saying about really drill down into what you really want and what you really enjoy, whether there's some element that actually has nothing to do with what the job is. It may be that, you know, you like the job, but you just don't like the company you're with at the moment. You need to change companies or something. Are there any other questions from anyone? Or is there anything that anyone would like to add? Rachel?
Yeah, no, I can see a question coming in. I'll leave the financial one maybe to Joy and Jem, because I haven't had to set up in a big set sort of corporate way like that. Alicia, you were asking, how do you avoid seeming like a jack of all trades instead of a master of many skills? I don't know if you're happy to unmute yourself and just say a bit more about what you mean by that. It sounds like that's kind of linked to something that you're thinking about. I don't want to put you on the spot, but
I relate to that straight off. I'd be interested to hear a perspective. Yeah.
I'd say my path. I was just going to say my path is that I was an interior designer and then did design PR, and now I've gone into journalism. But I've left I'm still in journalism, but I'm expanding as a ghostwriter. But I'm still at this thing, like people ask me, well, what do you do? And I say, well, I have got so many answers to that question. And then I feel like, oh, I just seem wishy-washy, and I'm not. You said something that really resonated, that to be very clear in your direction and what you're offering. But I feel like I'm offering so many different things that I don't know what to call myself. Even just a writer is what I've kind of settled on. But how do you? I'm a copywriter. I do investment writing as well, but not just design. So I do so many things. How do you guys tackle that?
I had a point when I was doing 5 or 6 different things, and I was just going mad with it. And I was in one of the sort of blogging groups, and it was a similar spread. And everyone said, well, I don't really know how you deal with it, but what do you really love? And in the end, 2 years later, the stuff I really loved had come to the fore. And so I am now starting to say no to anything that isn't, isn't really the blog or the YouTube channel. And now, of course, it's become much more crisp, and I can say, oh, I'm a YouTuber. But that's been, I think muddling around with lots of different strings to your bow is quite a natural progression in a sense, and that the right one will come out. But What do you think, Rachel, Joy?
Joy,
Rachel,
I'll let you come in, Joy, because you're nodding vociferously.
Alicia, I'm sorry, don't sweat it. I have, seriously, do not sweat it, because we're in the midst of having our 4th relaunch and 4th rebrand in 15 years with Words of Colour. And it's like, it's taken us this long to settle on, this is what we are. But we had to go through, and I've always been like that, because I don't just do one thing. That's why, in a way, creative entrepreneurship actually helped me to just say, that's who I am, because I do journalism, I do communications, I do productions, I do digital. And so there's a point where what I did, depending on the room I was in or who I was having the conversation with, I tailored it to them. I thought, they're not going to be interested in those bits, they're just going to be interested in this bit. And because there's a point where I was just saying everything and everyone was getting glassy-eyed, I thought, this is just not working. I'm someone who gets this from, I'm usually succinct, but it's like I didn't want to leave any bit out. And then also I say I'm a jacket of all trade, and I do all of them very well. And I just think that there is not one model. And I think that if it be comfortable in that and actually come up, it doesn't just automatically come up. You're going to be trying out different things. But like I say, I'm 56, and it took me till I was 50 to say I'm a creative entrepreneur. And I would say when we relaunch in April, with the help of my team, we have settled on something that has distilled what we have done for 16 years. So I really don't sweat it, seriously, but have more than a variation of what you are.
Rachel, would you like to add anything to that?
Just a quick one. I totally agree with what Joy was saying. I think, yeah, sometimes it's about, what you share in what environment, and that's fine. But I hear what you're saying, because sometimes you come to write like a LinkedIn profile or your website, and you're like, oh, shoot, how do I explain this? I would challenge you to say, how do you avoid seeming like a jack of all trades? My coach hat would say, is it that you seem like one or that you feel like one? Because sometimes what's happening is not what it doesn't matter, other people are fine with it, but you're feeling a bit wobbly about, oh shit, what if people think this? What if they see me as a bit vague or a bit like I'm doing a bit of everything? But so sometimes you have to make peace with the fact that the issue is perhaps linked a little bit with confidence or a sense of your own identity. One other thought for you, I think when you do, I had a bit of this because I coach, but I was still working as a journalist. I do facilitation work. So I've got different things like Joy has. And I think what helped me is to find what I call the kind of golden thread that runs through all of it. So you see, and I'm not saying you necessarily want to do this, but you see people on LinkedIn, for example, who kind of head themselves as, for example, a storyteller, which can sound a little bit wanky, excuse me, if you don't want to be too pretentious. But if you can find the thing that you think, actually, it's this skill set that shows up in all 4 of the things I do. It's that I'm a kind of master communicator, or I help people tell their story. And if you can find the thread that unites the things you do, you may find it easier to make peace with and explain. I don't know if that helps, but.
I was just about to say exactly that. I think typically we joke, my partner and I, at Christmas, I was gonna do a presentation to explain to the in-laws what I actually do, because no one knows. But I think the reason that I have managed to hone it down over the last 4 or 5 years is actually thinking about what links all that together and what's that purpose behind all of them. And typically there probably is one kind of facet that runs through everything. So yeah, I absolutely agree with what you both said, especially about switching it to different kind of audiences.
Well, we're just sort of getting to the end of the hour. It's been really interesting. Thank you so much, Rachel and Joy and Jem, and everyone for watching as well. If there's anything that crops up that you actually would like to ask, I'm sure if you emailed Women in Journalism, they'd pass it along to any of us, or I'm sure you could, look us all up on all the various platforms we're all on. And so just to say, sort of, I think Alison and Hilly might be coming. Hilly, you're coming in for some housekeeping, aren't you? There.
Oh, I can't hear you.
You're still on mute, I think. The joys of technology.
Was Hilly going to promote the next events? Was that potentially what Hilly was going to do?
Yes, I'm trying to think which of us can take over if she can't.
Yes,
no,
this is the answer.
Hilly's going to go and come back, because Zoom does that sometimes, where even when you're unmuted, it just mutes you.
Yeah.
So
if you like, I can tell you what's coming up while she's coming
that's
back.
Brilliant. Thank you.
So next Monday, is it next Monday? Well, March 7th, we've got an online event paying tribute to the journalists still in Afghanistan. That's going to be a really great online event, and we're also going to do an in-person one a little bit later down the line in July. So do join us for both of those. We've also got a live/hybrid event on March 28th, and in conversation with Victoria Newton, the editor of The Sun. So you can either join us online or kind of watch that along. And in April, we are very, very excited that we have our spring members party coming up, where I actually get to all see each other and have a glass of wine. So yeah, loads of stuff coming up. And just to stress that if you do join as a member, if you're here and you're not a member, you can get access to some of these things for free, some of them for cheaper. So I would very much recommend it. Hilly's just popped the link in the chat for all of the stuff. So yeah, there's loads coming up.
So Hilly, are you back with us to say goodbye, or?
Yes, I'm back. I hope so. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, good. Sorry, it was naughty Zoom, wouldn't let me speak. So yes, just to say thank you very much, everybody. That was a sort of amazing amount of advice and help and insight in an hour. And thanks, Jem, there for stepping up and doing the promotions. I do hope that we'll see you all at some of our forthcoming events. This is actually my last event as head of the Widge events team. I've been doing this for 10 years, so it's time for me to move on and do something different. But I've learned so much from all the fantastic panelists that we've had and the in-conversations and things. So I thoroughly recommend coming to as many of them as you can. I've learned absolutely heaps, and I'm very grateful to everyone who's taken part. So thanks again, everyone. Do get in touch with us. You're very welcome to join, or if you want to follow up anything from this evening, please do just pop us an email. Thanks a lot, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.